Good evening. I am the Maven of the Eventide, and welcome back to the Vampire Library, which is a library not for vampires, but full of vampire books. I mean, it could also be for vampires. If you are a vampire and you would like to come to my library full of vampire books, you are so very, very welcome. You are invited. Please. Well, it has been a while since the last time I did one of these vampire book haul videos, and I have acquired quite a few more vampire books and things. Since my last video, what has occurred? Halloween has occurred, and we have gone on into the holiday season, the gift-giving season, so I have quite a few new acquisitions. In that time, I went to New Orleans, I went to the Vampire Ball, and I got some stuff from New Orleans. I had also gone to New York City during the Broadway Cares flea market, where I acquired some interesting vampire items, so I have a lot to share with you this time. I hope your holiday season is going well. We're coming up on Christmas, that giftiest of holidays. So, I hope you receive very many vampire books this Christmas. Again, not in any particular order, just arranged by how well they stack, because these stacks do start to fall over. You can't see it, but I have 4 separate stacks here. This is Bite by Laurel K. Hamilton. It is a short story anthology. It says it includes stories by Charlaine Harris, Mary Janice Davidson, Angela Knight, Vicky Taylor. Feel the touch of darkness. Follow a vampire hunter who can be as deadly as her prey. Meet a down-home southern girl who's found out, much to her chagrin, that vampires are her type. Feel the euphoria of fear in the shadow of a reluctant queen of the undead. Step closer to the hot-blooded edge of passion as a strange new mythology of the night is unveiled. The Bite is back in vampire fiction as today's most provocative authors cast their irresistible spells on you. So I guess these are like romance-themed vampire stories? Cool. Featuring original stories by Laurel K. Hamilton, an all-new Anita Blake vampire hunter short story, and a never-before-published Sookie Stackhouse tale. This came out in 2005, and it looks like it has 5 stories in it. Very cool. Thank you for sending this to me. This is Vampires for Life by author C.T. Phipps, and this is a Straight Outta Fankton novel. You will recall that we read Straight Outta Fankton for vampire reviews previously, and I have also received another novel in that series, 100 Miles in Vampin', so now I have 3 books in that series. I'm not going to read you the summary of this because it has some spoilers if you don't know how these 2 books end. But it is book 3 in the Straight Outta Fankton series, which, it's called Vampires for Life. You think it would be book 4, like Fast and Furious. Missed opportunity. Thank you. Summer of Night by Dan Simmons. It's blurbed by Stephen King. What does Stephen King say? Simmons writes like a hot-rodding angel, loading his American nightmare with scares, a suspense, and a sweet, surprising nostalgia. One of those rare must-read books. I am in awe of Dan Simmons. Well, that's very nice of you to say, Stephen King. It is the summer of 1960, and in the small town of Elm Haven, Illinois, 5 12-year-old boys are forging the powerful bonds that a lifetime of change will not break. From sunset bike rides to shaded hiding places in the woods, the boys' days are marked by all of the secrets and silences of an idyllic childhood. But amid the sun-drenched cornfields, their loyalty will be piteously tested. When a long silent bell peals in the middle of the night, the townsfolk know it marks the end of their carefree days. From the depths of the old central school, a hulking fortress tinged with the mahogany scents of coffins, an invisible evil is rising. Strange and horrifying events begin to overtake everyday life, spreading terror through the once peaceful town. Determined to exorcise this ancient plague, Mike, Dwayne, Dale, Harlan, and Kevin must wage a war of blood against an arcane abomination who owns the night. So this originally came out in 1991, but this edition was re-released in 2011 with a new introduction by the author. Thank you for saying this to me. I have actually not ever heard of this book, even though it's been around for a while and, supposedly compared to Stephen King a lot, enough that he blurbed it, but it sounds really interesting. I'm definitely going to put this one up for a vote for a Vampire Book Club reads. You should join the Vampire Book Club. If you're not a member already, you don't have to read the books. You can just come hang out with us. The link is in the description of this video, join my Discord, join the Vampire Book Club, and read vampire books with us. The Holmes Dracula File by Fred Saberhagen. This is the second book in the series. The first one is called The Dracula Tapes, and then the sequel is Where Dracula Meets Sherlock Holmes. If this sounds familiar, yes, I have mentioned it to you before. Someone else sent me this book previously, which I talked to you about in a previous video, and then someone else sent me this book recently, but it has a different cover. And this cover is very cool because we have a very sexy Dracula here with a very sexy vampire bat in the background, and I just love this cover, so thank you so much for sending this to me. And since we're talking about Sherlock Holmes, we also have Sherlock Holmes versus Dracula, or The Adventure of the Sanguinary Count, by Lauren D. Estelman. No, it's by John Watson. Lauren D. Estelman just edited it. A deserted ship beaches on a treacherous reef in English harbor, its lifeless captain lashed to the wheel, its cargo 50 boxes of earth, its only passenger a huge black dog which vanishes into the night. The mystery is clearly a case for the infallible Sherlock Holmes, but the unexplained disappearance of the ship's strange cargo, the discovery of puncture wounds on the dead captain's throat, and a rash of bizarre nocturnal crimes all point to a villain that unnerves even Holmes, Count Dracula himself. Based on a newly discovered Watson manuscript, Sherlock Holmes vs. Dracula chronicles the events leading up to the vampire's expulsion from England by Holmes and subsequent destruction by Professor Van Helsing. From the ghastly finish of the undead lady in white to the Count's chilling appearance at 221B Baker Street, followed by a hair-raising chase across England, Holmes' adventure with this formidable foe is alive with action and suspense. Lauren Estelman's skillful and authentic blending of the terrifying events of Bram Stoker's Dracula with the unforgettable characters of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle has resulted in a tale that will delight Holmes fans and vampire lovers alike. This is just the story of Dracula itself with Sherlock Holmes involved. It's not a new mystery. It's Holmes solving the mystery we already know. So that makes me wonder how they're going to make it interesting. Like, what about it is going to be a mystery to the reader? Because you can't read a Sherlock Holmes book without it being an actual mystery novel, right? So that was Sherlock Holmes versus Dracula, not to be confused with Sherlock Holmes and Count Dracula by Christian Claver. Oh, this one starts out differently. Sherlock Holmes is dead. His body lies in a solitary grave on the Sussex Downs, England, but Dr. Watson survives and is now given permission to release tales in Sherlock's classified dossier, those cases that are, dear reader, unbelievable, for their subject matter is of the most ultra and grotesque nature. So I guess it takes place while he's alive. In this thrilling first volume of the classified dossier, a Transylvanian nobleman called Count Dracula arrives at Baker Street, seeking the help of Sherlock Holmes for his beloved wife, Mina, has been kidnapped. But Dracula is a client like no other, and Holmes and Watson must confront, despite the wild, unbelievable notion, the existence of vampires. Before long, Holmes, Watson, and their new vampire allies must work together to banish a powerful enemy growing in the shadows. Okay, so Dracula's married to Mina. Mina's been kidnapped by this powerful enemy, and Holmes and Watson apparently have multiple vampire allies. I am very curious. I actually put this book up for a vote for Vampire Book Club this month, which we just voted on a couple days ago. Maybe a couple weeks ago, if you are not a member of my Patreon and you're seeing this video after everyone else does. But it didn't win the vote. This is not what we're reading next for Vampire Book Club, but I am very interested in it. So I think at one point I'm going to put all three of these Sherlock Holmes Dracula books up together and let people vote between the three of them, and we'll see which one wins. I always like to theme the Vampire Book Club vote. Dracula, the vampire play in 3 acts. This is the original Dracula play by Hamilton Dean, which was granted permission by Bram Stoker to make into this play. Bram Stoker and Hamilton Dean were bros. And this is the script, the play script, the stage show play script that the movie with Bela Lugosi, the 1931 movie, was based on. So the 1931 movie is very different from the book, which you would know. And what was a stepping stone between those two was this play, which Bela Lugosi starred in this play when it was on stage, and then that's how he got the part in the movie. I've never actually read this play or seen it done live, so now I finally have a copy. Thank you. I've been wanting to read this forever. This is the play that combines Lucy and Mina into one character and makes Lucy Dr. Seward's daughter. Yeah, it's just, you gotta condense things for stage, I guess. Dracula's like this thick, right? In this play, it's only this thick. We should put on this play. Who's with me? This is Red by Chase Bergren. and this is really interesting. This is Dracula, the book, turned into poetry by taking the book and deleting words, and only the words left behind are the poem in order. Here's the explanation. Red consists of 27 erasure poems. They were produced using a system of formal constraints. Text was erased while preserving the word order of the original source, with no words altered or added according to a strict set of self-imposed rules. The poems use as a source the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. As the text of Dracula, a classic Victorian-era horror novel soaked with the disdain of femininity and the misogyny of its time, is erased, a new story is told, in which its narrator takes back the agency stolen from her predecessors. This work was written at the same time as its author had begun their own gender transition. As they were discovering and attempting to define their own womanhood, the narrator of these poems traveled alongside them. So Dracula erased and reimagined to become a gender empowerment poetry saga. This is The Steins 2, Carmilla by James D. Lee, which is a sequel to The Steins, which we talked about previously. It was about a girl named Mary who has a family that's full of vampires, monsters, werewolves, all kind of monster mash. And this one is called Carmilla. I'm not going to read you the description because it does have spoilers for the first one, but Carmilla is a ruthless villain who's trying to destroy Mary, so Mary is up against Carmilla now. Very exciting. And this was sent to me by the author who autographed it for me. Thank you. Follow Mary in this epic story of tragedy and trials as she grows from a young woman to a beautiful, strong-willed lady. With the help of her distant family, can she overcome everything to finally find happiness in her life? Or is she doomed to the fate that took her parents? I like Carmilla's very sexy dress on this cover. She looks amazing. These are really cool. I got Dracula and Frankenstein Kids Classics. So it's an abridged book for children, fully illustrated. Oh, that's so gorgeous. I love illustrated children's book versions of Gothic tales. I collect them. I didn't even know these ones existed, so thank you so much for sending them to me. Dracula and Frankenstein. Look at him. He just wants love. Empire of the Vampire by J. Christoph. This is a new book that just came out earlier this year, and it has gotten a lot of buzz. I've heard a lot of people excited about this book. I did not realize how chunky it was. Look how huge this book is. It's a young adult novel. It's got some really pretty, gorgeous illustrations and papers. I like that these vampires are in like Rococo costume. That makes me want to read it more. This is the exclusive edition, and I don't know how that makes it different from the other editions. Maybe the other editions aren't illustrated, but it is autographed by the author. So I'm very happy to have this edition. Thank you for sending this to me. This was on my vampire wish list, which I don't think you know that person who sent it to me, but now I have it. I was going to put it up for the Vampire Book Club vote this month, but it's so big that I thought maybe people wouldn't read such a big book over the holidays, so we're going to read something different instead. But definitely in a future month, I need to read this book very soon. A lot of Dracula this go around. This is a copy of the original Bram Stoker's Dracula, illustrated by Edward Gorey. Gorgeous. It's got like a felt velvet cover. Look at the ends. It's got bats printed on the edge. And then it has all the Edward Gorey illustrations. It's got the red text. I have a different version of Edward Gorey's illustrations and an annotated version of Dracula, but it's not as pretty as this one. This is so pretty. I also have the Edward Gorey toy theater of Dracula, where you can actually set up the little theater with the Edward Gorey illustrations. Edward Gorey did the stage design for the Broadway show version of the Hamilton Dean play of Dracula when it came to Broadway in the 1970s. So we had all these Edward Gorey set designs. It's a very strange, minimalistic design, very Gorey-esque illustrations, like pencil sketches. Everything was black and white. The bats are my favorite part. The Blood Gospel by James Rollins and Rebecca Cantrell. I can tell this copy has been very well loved. It has been taped back together. So whoever sent this to me either read it and loved it or bought it used somewhere. And someone loved this book. A Gothic tale about an ancient order and the hunt for a miraculous book known only as the Blood Gospel. Some books should never be found, never opened, until now. An earthquake in Masada, Israel, reveals a tomb buried in the heart of the mountain. A trio of investigators, Sergeant Jordan Stone, a military forensics expert, Father Rune Korza, a Vatican priest, and Dr. Aaron Granger, a brilliant but disillusioned archaeologist, are sent to explore the macabre discovery, a subterranean temple holding the crucified body of a mummified girl. But a brutal attack at the site sets the three on the run, thrusting them into a race to recover what was once preserved in the tomb's sarcophagus, a book rumored to have been written by Christ's own hand, a tome that is said to hold the secrets to his divinity. But the enemy who hounds them is a force of ancient evil directed by a leader of impossible ambitions and incalculable cunning. And I'm assuming that means he's a vampire, since this book was sent to me. Although sometimes people send me books that aren't vampire books just because they think I'll like them, but it does have a bunch of bats on the cover, so I'm guessing maybe like it has surprise vampires. Or maybe just vampire vibes. If you know whether this book has actual vampires in it or not, please tell me. It doesn't make a difference to me, but it does make a difference which bookshelf I put it on in the library, and also whether it can be up for a vote for Vampire Book Club or not. The Twilight Director's Notebook. The story of how we made the movie, based on the novel by Stephenie Meyer. Okay, so you probably know this, but Catherine Hardwicke, the director of Twilight, loved Twilight. She was a huge fangirl, and you can just see all of her adoration of the source material in the movie. The movie is very much like a fan's dream come true. It's very indulgent. It's very beautiful. You could tell that the woman who made Twilight loved Twilight. The actors, not so much, but the director certainly did. And Twilight was actually an indie film, and it did so well that it got kind of taken over by Hollywood production. And instead of bringing back this super fan director, they just hired like a Hollywood dude bro to direct the next movies. And yeah, they kind of lost that really indulgent super fan charm that they had. Whether you like Twilight or not, you can tell it was a labor of love. And, you know, as far as movies go, it's a perfectly competent film. You know, you may not like the story, but the filmmaking, I actually just rewatched it recently for a vampire live stream with one of the fan groups that I'm in. And we're like, haha, let's watch Twilight and make fun of it. And we're like, why are people so hard on this movie? Like, yeah, we don't like the vampires. We don't like what the vampires represent. We don't like the vampire rules, and we don't like what's done with the vampires. But as a movie and as like something that's like romantic, you know what? Watching it again, I'm like, I kind of love how awful and creepy Edward is. Like, yeah, he is really creepy and not romantic at all. And that's how vampires should be. And I don't know why people think he's like not worthy to be a vampire when he's doing some really creepy vampiric stuff. So, you know, good for him. Twilight, not as bad as you remember. And this is the director's notebook of all of her notes and sketches and everything that all her thoughts and feelings, the storyboards, that you can see the mind that movie came from. Someone who just loved Stephenie Meyer's work so much that she made the most indulgent movie out of it. And you know Twilight never would have taken off the way it did without that movie. That movie made the phenomenon. Like, the books were big, but that movie was what did it. And the rest of the world has never been the same since. Vampires, for good or for bad, Murphy's Law, 90% of everything is crap, whatever, but that 10%, we'll take it. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices to get the gold. The vampire gold. A copy of the Blu-ray of Johnny Depp's Dark Shadows. Wow. It's been years since I don't think I've watched this movie since I made my review video of it. And as you may recall from my review video, I was not a fan of it. I didn't like Johnny Depp's performance particularly, and I didn't like the tone the director took with it. Like, I didn't mind it being like silly because it's like making fun of the 60s style, but it was tonally inconsistent in itself. It didn't go all the way into it enough, and it didn't respect the original enough. And, you know, that was my opinion when I saw this movie. When it was in theaters, which was like, 8 or 9 years ago? It's been a while. So now I can watch it again and, you know, maybe give it a second shake or just have some fun. Thank you for sending it to me. I love everything you send me, no matter how good or bad it is. I just like having it because I collect things. It is my vampire horde. Vampires, Hearts, and Other Dead Things by Margie Fuston. You can have a heartbeat and still be dead. This is a young adult book. Victoria and her dad have shared a love of the undead since the first vampire revealed his existence on live TV. Public fear soon drove the vampires back into hiding, yet Victoria and her father still dream about finding one together. But when her dad is diagnosed with terminal cancer, it's clear that's not going to happen. Instead, Victoria vows to find a vampire herself so that she can become one and then save her father. Armed with research, speculations, and desperation, and helped by her estranged best friend Henry, Victoria travels to New Orleans in search of a miracle, because, all vampires come from New Orleans. There, she meets Nicholas, a mysterious young man who might give her what she desires. But first, he needs Victoria to prove she loves life enough to live forever. She agrees to complete a series of challenges, from scarfing sugar-drenched beignets to singing with a jazz band, all to show that she has what it takes to be immortal. But truly living while her father is dying feels like a betrayal. Victoria must figure out how to experience joy and grief at once, trusting all the while that Nicholas will hold up his end of the bargain, because the alternative is too impossible to imagine. Wow, this book sounds really heavy for a pink and blue looking romance novel. This book is also brand new. It just came out this year. I love that we're getting so many vampire books in publishing again. Vampires are back. Yeah, told you they'd come back. All These Bodies by Kendari Blake. 16 bloodless bodies. Ooh, that's promising. 2 teenagers, 1 impossible explanation. Summer 1958. A string of murders plagues the Midwest. The victims are found in their cars and in their homes, even in their beds, their bodies drained, but with no blood anywhere. September 19th. The Carlson family is slaughtered in their Minnesota farmhouse, and the case gets its first lead. 15-year-old Marie Catherine Hale is found at the scene. She's covered in blood from head to toe, and at first she's mistaken for a survivor, but not a drop of the blood is hers. Michael Jensen, son of the local sheriff, yearns to become a journalist and escape his small town. He never imagined that the biggest story in the country would fall into his lap, or that he would be pulled into the investigation when Marie decides that he is the only one she will confess to. As Marie recounts her version of the story, it falls on Michael to find the truth. What really happened the night that the Carlsons were killed? And how did one girl wind up in the middle of all those bodies? Is it because she's a vampire? I certainly hope so. This is really cool. This is Bram Stoker's Dracula starring Bela Lugosi. This is a graphic novel of the book of Dracula, but they have drawn Dracula to look specifically like Bela Lugosi, because why not? But it's not following the movie version. It is following the book version, so we have a more canon-accurate portrayal of Dracula, but with Bela Lugosi in it this time. The art is really pretty. There's Lucy, Vampire Lucy, the bloofer lady. I love this. So much Dracula this time. Thank you. And I have issue 10 of The Vampire the Masquerade, Winter's Teeth. Finally, it is complete. As we have discussed before, I had the compiled book 1 of the first few issues, and then I've been getting the single issues of each one that's come out since. So now we finished the story. And what comes next? Let me tell you, there was a follow-up, World of Darkness, Crimson Thaw, a 3-part series, and I have all 3 parts, so I've got the whole set. World of Darkness, Crimson Thaw. Cecily Bain has become everything she never wanted as the Prince of the Twin Cities, but her rule over a fractured, backbiting vampire court is interrupted by an intruder, something big, hairy, and full of teeth. Good. She was missing a good scrape. There's worse living in the shadows than vampires. Sounds like vampires versus werewolves. Great. Give the poor vampires a break. A copy of Eerie magazine from 1978, this vintage copy. You can see it costs $1.25 back in 1978. Dracula's Children Alive is the story. It's a comic book about Dracula's children versus the usual Eerie magazine crew. I've never read any of this comic before. I'm very curious. Thank you for saying this to me. I didn't even know this existed. You guys find such cool stuff and share it with me? Did you know that this month's Life magazine is all about vampires? And by this month, I mean last month, It came out in like November, not for Halloween. It was an after Halloween thing that the Life magazine vampire edition came out. According to this, it says display until January 7th. So it's just their winter magazine. And of course, you know, the first thing that I look for when I flip to see their entire overview of vampires, they have like a whole spread in here on like Charlaine Harris. And, you know, they got all the Dracula, the Bela Lugosi. The first thing I looked through to find in here, ooh, there's the Phantom of the Opera. He's in here too. I wanted to see what they had about Interview with the Vampire, my favorite vampire movie. The only thing they have in this entire magazine about Interview with the Vampire, the most important vampire movie of the modern era, is this 2-page spread of stills from the movie, a picture of Anne Rice, rest in peace, and this horrible little blurb at the bottom, which I will read to you. It says, Tom Cruise, Anne Rice, above, who wrote the novel Interview with the Vampire and adapted it into the movie's screenplay, initially voiced disapproval of Cruise's casting by declaring him to be no more my Lestat than Edward G. Robinson is Rhett Butler. She was right. Cruise had never before played a villain, much less a world-weary bisexual demon in a strawberry blonde wig. Asked to juice a rat like an orange into a wineglass, waltz with a corpse, and plant a terminal hickey on Kirsten Dunst's neck, he looks completely out of his element. The mission was indeed impossible. What the hell is wrong with this copywriter? Did they not see the full-page newspaper ad that Anne Rice took out apologizing for disparaging Tom Cruise after she saw the movie and saw how awesome he was, how amazing he did, how he, like, perfectly embodies Lestat's spirit? Like, yeah, he doesn't look like him, but you're never going to find an actor who looks exactly like a book character. He got the spirit, and that's what matters. And Anne Rice loved him in that movie. So whoever wrote this copy just didn't do their research, clearly isn't a fan of Interview with the Vampire, and yet is somehow writing an entire Life magazine worth of vampires. Very disappointing. I haven't read the rest of the magazine yet. I just got it very recently. Thank you for sending it to me. But, you know, gives me pause. Plus, the truth about vampire bats. I didn't know there were lies about vampire bats that needed to be corrected. I'm very curious. This is a copy of the Warhammer Age of Sigmar Death Battle Tome Soulbright Gravelords. Thank you for sending me this. You know, to add to my growing Warhammer collection. I guess I'm just going to have so much Warhammer soon, and I still haven't really even gotten into it. There's a whole world of Warhammer left to be open to me. Very spooky and gothic. Absolutely gorgeous. Chronicles of Endless Night. A couple of vampire children's books, which my fledgling spawn absolutely adored. First, we have The Vam Penguin, which is about a family of vampires that go to the zoo, and their vampire baby switches places with a penguin. They enjoy the zoo, and they don't even notice that their baby has switched places with penguin. It's adorable. I loved it. And then, I Love My Fangs by Kelly Lee Miller, about a vampire who loses his first fang as a child. And, you know, kids lose their teeth and then they grow big kid teeth. And he sort of has a journey of grieving and mourning when he loses his fang. But then he grows his new, like, big kid fang. So good for him. It is another very cute book. And it's a Monster Mash book. He's got, like, a classroom full of all different kinds of monsters. This is Paperbacks from Hell. It's a nonfiction book. The Twisted History of 70s and 80s Horror Fiction by Grady Hendrix, who you would remember as the author of the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which we read for our vampire book club, and we very much enjoyed. And Grady Hendrix wrote this nonfiction book about 70s and 80s horror fiction before, and it does have a section on Interview with a Vampire. I'm excited to read the rest of it, full of like glossy photographs and posters accompanying the text. A very beautiful book. Another nonfiction book, this one about horror cinema, the best scary movies of all time. And the person who sent to me says to look over here. They put a little flag on there for me. Vampires and Werewolves, an entire section in this book about vampire and werewolf cinema. Yes, thank you. Now, these books were sent to me along with some of the others, and I'm not sure if they have vampires in it or not. My guess is not, because they don't say they do, but they must be tangentially related to vampires. Otherwise, you wouldn't have sent them to me. Probably spooky, gothic, or, you know, monstery in some way. This is Alice Isn't Dead by Joseph Fink, the author of Welcome to Nightville. This isn't a story, it's a road trip. Keisha Taylor lived a quiet life with her wife Alice until the day that Alice disappeared. After months of searching, presuming she was dead, Keisha held a funeral, mourned, and gradually tried to get on with her life. But that was before Keisha started to see her wife, again and again, in the background of news reports from all over America. Alice isn't dead, and she is showing up at every major tragedy and accident in the country. Following a line of clues, Keisha takes a job as a long-haul truck driver and begins searching for Alice. In pursuit of her missing wife, she will stumble on forgotten American history of secret deals and buried crimes, an inhuman serial killer who has picked her as her next target, and an otherworldly conflict being waged in the quiet corners of our nation's highway system, uncovering a conspiracy that goes way beyond one missing woman. Intriguing. I don't know if she's a vampire or, if she's back from the dead. That's vampire related. Plus, I very much enjoyed Welcome to Night Vale back in the day when it was the thing, 7 years ago. Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Kaw. And N.K. Jemisin says it's beautifully delicious. A gorgeously creepy haunted house tale steeped in Japanese folklore. A Heian-era mansion stands abandoned, its foundations resting on the bones of a bride, and its walls packed with remains of the girls sacrificed to keep her company. It's the perfect venue for a group of thrill-seeking friends who brought back together to celebrate a wedding. A night of food, drinks, and games quickly spirals into a nightmare as secrets get dragged out and relationships are tested. But the house has secrets too. Lurking in the shadows is the ghost bride with a black smile and a hungry heart, and she gets lonely down there in the dirt. So she sounds like a ghost, not a vampire, but she sounds perhaps like a vampiric ghost that's going to, take victims. I love ghost stories. Vampires are not required. Thank you for sending this to me. A Junior Monster Scouts book by Joe McGee, Monsters of Disguise. Instead of Masters of Disguise. The Junior Monster Scouts are Vampira, Wolfie, Frankie, and their new friend George, an invisible boy. And they've got to uncover a trickster's plot. I have not heard of this series. Thank you for sharing with me. Ooh, it's illustrated. I love children's series that are spooky. Yes, thank you. A fancy copy of The Nightmare Before Christmas, the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition. Ooh, with the CD. Does that have the original poem on it? Yes. I love The Nightmare Before Christmas. It's so seasonally appropriate. And it does have vampires in it. There's one. Gustavo, the Shy Ghost. This is a very adorable book that my fledgling spawn also loved about a shy ghost who wants to make friends. And the Shy Ghost also goes to a Monster Mash school that does have, a vampire at it. So, it counts. It's a very cute book. We loved it. Thank you for sharing this with us. This is the graphic novel edition of The Wolf Gift by Anne Rice. This was her first werewolf novel. She's famous for her vampire novels, her witch novels. She also wrote werewolf novels. And this is the graphic novel version of it. You know how much I love Anne Rice. She's my favorite vampire author of all the vampire authors ever. Her vampires are my favorite vampires. We are very sad that she has passed away. We talked about it a lot on our book club live stream the other night. And as I explained then, I plan to make a tribute video to her. Another one. I've made several. If you haven't watched it yet, please watch this video that I wrote last year that I made for PBS It's Lit. I'm not in the video, but I wrote it, and someone else is hosting it, who you may recognize. But all of my thoughts and feelings about Anne Rice and what an amazing person she was is in that video. Her death was not a shock or unexpected. It was pretty obvious that she wasn't doing well, but still, it hit really hard. And I wrote a blog post about it on Tumblr and on Facebook, which you may have already read, so you know all my feelings. I don't want to talk too much about her now, but I do want to just share my love for Anne Rice, even if she did also write werewolves, the traitor. The person who sent me that book also sent me 3 of Christopher Rice's books. Christopher Rice is Anne Rice's son, also a prolific author. He hasn't written any vampire books. Some of his books are just contemporary literary novels, but some are paranormal. This is Density of Souls. It's set in New Orleans. It doesn't have anything supernatural in it, but it's just like a coming-of-age story about a gay young man in New Orleans. It was his first novel. This is The Vines, which is a supernatural horror novel. And this is A Bone Music. It is the first in a series, another one of his horror novels. I don't have a lot of Christopher Rice books, and I've only read a couple of his ever so far, so I have a lot to catch up on. But he is also just another wonderful human being writing wonderful books. And maybe one day he'll write vampires of his own. He has co-written books with his mother, sequels to her Mummy book, and the next co-written book between Christopher and Anne of The Mummy, the third in the series, is coming out in February. Definitely on my wish list. I love the first Mummy book. He didn't help her write that, obviously. And I don't know how much he wrote of the new one that's coming out and how much she wrote, considering the circumstances, but they are sharing credit on that. So Anne Rice's last book that's going to come out, last book she wrote, February. We're not here to be sad today. I am wearing my Gorgeous Fiend shirt, which is a Anne Rice reference. It's something that Lestat calls himself. Lestat calls himself a gorgeous fiend, and he is right. One of my friends on one of my Anne Rice fan spaces commissioned me to make this shirt for them. And they requested like a different style of shirt, but like the logo is what we came up with together based on her commission. And I used my font, my Vampire Reviews Maven of the Eventide font, and of course I had to make a test one just to make sure the shirt was okay, for myself. So I had to keep a test version of the shirt. Honoring Lestat today by grabbing our own chest. Trick or Treat, A History of Halloween by Lisa Morton, winner of the 2012 Halloween Book Festival's grand prize. The first comprehensive history of the misunderstood festival of Halloween. Playfully sets the record straight on the origins of Halloween, explores its migration from the old world to the new and back again, discusses the role of consumer culture in establishing supposedly ancient traditions, and concludes with an observation that Halloween's ever-changing nature has allowed it to be adapted for countless purposes around the globe. Non-fiction book about Halloween. Yes, thank you. This was actually sent to me for Halloween. I've had it for a couple months now, but just getting around to making this video because I gotta let the books stack up to share with you. This was one of my most anticipated books of the year. Not vampires, but it's a Death and the Maiden book, and I'm always here for books about Death and the Maiden. This is Volume 1 of Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe, a very, very wonderful comic. It's a web comic, but it's been reformatted here for print comic. And I've read all the web comics, so I've read all this. This is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, so it has like a different cover and like different features. It includes a bonus chapter in the back that never made it onto the internet. So if you read it online, you should still get this book so you can read the bonus chapter. And keep it forever. I can't wait for all the volumes to come out. I'm going to get them all. This got slightly delayed during the publishing delay that happened recently. So finally. I love Hades and Persephone, I love Death and the Maiden, and I love Lore Olympus. It is excellent, and everyone needs to read it. I've been telling you that for years. I also received the trilogy of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, gothic young adult books, thank you, as well as Tales of the Peculiar, which is a very beautiful little book. It's got like a ribbon in it. I love the gilding. Beautiful. A copy of The Exorcist, which I have never read. A copy of Unspoken by Sarah Rees Brennan, which I have read, but I did not have this copy, this beautiful hardback red cover copy. It's gorgeous. It's a gothic novel, very gothic, very spooky, about spooky wizards. It's been 7 years since I read it, so maybe it's time to read it again. A couple Shirley Jackson books, Gothic Queen, The Haunting of Hill House, and We Have Always Lived in the Castle. And this is just a beautiful edition of We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I love fancy editions of books. The Shiver Trilogy by Maggie Steve Vader, which, as I understand, are werewolf books. That's okay. No, thank you. They're young adult books, young adult werewolf books, and maybe there's also vampires in it. I don't know. We'll find out. This is an edition of Screen Ads Monthly, which is just a collection of screen advertisements for movies that came out, but this is the edition that has Phantom in it, the 1940s Phantom. This was printed in 1967. Vintage. Thank you for saying this to me. I like anything for my Phantom of the Opera collection. So this is something that I picked up at the Broadway flea market. I'm very proud of this. This is Michael Crawford in his starring role of Count von Krolock in the Broadway musical flop Dance of the Vampires. And it's autographed. He autographed it with Love Michael Crawford. And they sold it in this frame. So, I can just hang it straight up on my wall. And he's just singing his vampire song there in his little vampire outfit. Yeah, he was in that show. I saw that show 7 times. I talked about my thoughts and feelings on the Broadway version of Dance of the Vampires in my video about the movie it was based on, The Fearless Vampire Killers. We had some feelings. Also, official merch from that Broadway musical, Dance of the Vampires Plastic Fangs, child size. I didn't even see these while I was at the Broadway flea market. Lindsay Ellis saw them and bought them for me because she loves me. Thank you. Monster bookmark page clips. There's Dracula, the Mummy, the Werewolf, Frankenstein. They're so cute. Mark all my books with these. So when I was in New Orleans going to the Vampire Ball, of course I had to go to the Vampire Cafe, and I told you all about the Vampire Boutique, which is adjacent to the Vampire Cafe. They're run by the same people. And the Vampire Boutique is just this tiny little shop that sells tons of vampire-related stuff. We talked about a gift box from them. We had fun. And a friend gave me a gift certificate to the Vampire Boutique, so I had to go there and buy something for myself. And what I chose was this beautiful stuffed plush bat. This is handmade, one of a kind. They had a bunch of different bats. Of course, I chose the black and red, like opera-going bat. There was like a clown bat. There were all different kinds of spooky goth bats, and they're supposed to all come with a story. They're called Deathlings, handmade for you by Anita DeLuccio. And his story is Red Velvet Bat. This cultured bat enjoys the theater. He loves hanging from behind the velvet curtains while you're in the bathroom during intermission. Well, aren't you a creeper? I just love his little off-center face. He's so cute and so soft. My baby. I love that you sent me this very teeny tiny coffin-shaped bookshelf that has a skull and candelabra on it. And then all these teeny tiny little books. This is the entire original 11 Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles collection in teeny tiny book form, and a little teeny tiny version of Phantom of the Opera up there, which has the text and illustrations in it of the original illustrations that came out back in the day. This is just so gorgeous. And my fledgling spawn loves it too. It's a very cute tiny vampire bookshelf. I almost cried when I got this. It's so cute. And the same person had made for me, this is a keychain of a book, another teeny tiny book, but it's custom made clearly because it's The Company of Death, my book, the book I wrote in keychain form. I know it's hard for you to see, but it's this book cover as a keychain from New Leaf Public Library. It is so cute. Handmade with love. Thank you. Speaking of death, this is my Christmas present to myself. This is a Death and the Maiden statue by artist Lisa Snellings from We Love Poppets. It's called Poppets Dance Macabre. It is a limited edition, number 11 out of 100. She's only going to make 100 of these. She sells at her Etsy store. I saw this artist for the first time when I went to a nerd convention several years ago. I think 3 years ago now at this point, back in the pre-COVID days. And she was selling her art at a table there. There was also an auction, and I didn't win anything at the auction, and I always regretted not picking up something of hers. But the ones she was selling, they were like this big. They were very tiny. So when I saw her selling this on Etsy, I was like, I have to get it. And then it came, and it was huge. And I was like, oh my God, Merry Christmas, me. I love me too. Dance of Death, Death and the Maiden, Danse Macabre with Poppets. This is an I Heart Lestat pin button, which I should be wearing right here, right? I'm just gonna fix that. Double up my Lestat appreciation on my chest area. This was swag that was from the release of Prince Lestat, the book, in October of 2014. And I went to that book release, but I sure didn't get one of these. But one of you did, or found it and sent it to me. So thank you. Now I have it. I love Lestat too. Now everyone can know that because I'm sure they didn't already know that about me. Speaking of Lestat, this is fan art of Lestat and Louis. Isn't it gorgeous? The same person also sent me a print of me that they drew holding my Anne Rice book and my skull. Thank you. Oh, there's me also. That was right when I first dyed my hair black. I remember when you do that picture, when I was like, I have black hair now. I'm gonna need more picture frames. Yes, I would hang art of myself on my wall. Lestat would do it. So at the Vampire Ball, we got swag. It was swag bag. I got several things. Not everything in here is from the Vampire Ball. I'll just kind of put all my New Orleans stuff inside the same swag bag. So here's bumper sticker. Claudia drained your honor student. She would too. Oh, another sticker. That's Louis, Lestat, and Claudia, and it says, we drained your stick figure family. Oh, and there's the stick figure, dead and drained of blood. I could stick that on my car. The neighbors would never judge me. A fleur-de-lis necklace. Oh, with a little tragedy mask. It's dripped in blood. Beautiful. It says, tomb it may concern. Save our cemetery. So yeah, New Orleans Cemetery Conservation Project. And a rosary-style Mardi Gras beads necklace. Oh, this was my dance card from the Vampire Ball. It has like the program and of all the concerts and stuff going on, as well as a dance card. As you can see, I did not fill out any dances on my dance card. No, nobody wanted to dance with me at the Vampire Ball. I am a wallflower. But I was there to see and be seen, and there was much to see. I very much enjoyed the Vampire Ball. And, you know, this dance card was a very cute program you could wear on your wrist like in oldie times. On this, my friend gave me, the same friend who gave me the gift certificate, this is a sheet of vampire stickers from the Vampire Boutique. Very cool. Got to stick them on something. She also gave me this vampire candle. It bleeds. A stake pen from the wonderful Rose Sinister Vampires. Rose Sinister is another vampire reviewer on the internet. You may have listened to her show. She also does tours in New Orleans, and I got to meet her and have lunch with her at the Vampire Cafe, and she gave me one of her stake pens to remember her by. So much stuff! Funko Pop! To add to my growing Funko Pop collection, I've got Dracula, I've got other Dracula, I've got Elvira, Edgar Allan Poe, Morticia Addams, and now I have Eric Northman, who is one of the best vampires to ever exist. If you're going to pick like a random vampire to send me, Eric is a good one to pick. Thank you. What else? I've been doing more crafting, so I made this shadow box. It's a skull with like flowers on it. There you go, not reflecting. So I took this really cool online class through New York City's Morbid Anatomy Museum, which you may have heard of, which was an actual museum in New York City. It's not physically there anymore because, you know, times are hard. But they do online classes, and this class was a Make Your Own Memento Mori class. And it was 4 weeks of lectures of learning about the history of death rituals around the world, and the final ritual was making Memento Mori. This wasn't my Memento Mori. This was one of just like the weekly projects where we were supposed to take the skull and fill the other side with a self-portrait of life, and I chose to do cutout paper flowers because, you know, I do shadow boxes. And I got some like dead butterflies in the background. My first time doing paper flowers. I could make more of these. And then I decided to get ambitious and made Frankenstein and his bride in this shadow box. It was, you know, it's not always about vampires or death. Sometimes it's about like your monster child who just wants to fall in love. And there's a bat. Thank you so much to everyone who sends me vampire books from my vampire library. I think, like, am I getting close to having all the vampire books? I'll have, like, the complete vampire library, every vampire book that was ever written. I'm sure that's not actually possible. But all the, like, the important ones, soon my collection will be complete. I hope you, too, acquire some vampire books for your holiday season gift-giving rituals. And just, you know, have a merry holiday season in general. It's been a tough year. It's been a tough couple years. It's been a tough decade. And it's only the first year of the decade. But please, try to enjoy yourself. Try to relax. You deserve it. The vampires would want you to. If you would like to send me anything at all, but preferably related to my interests, my P.O. Box address is in the description of this video, along with a link to buy a copy of The Company of Death. Not a teeny tiny adorable copy, but like a real one that you can read, along with a link to my Patreon patrons. So if you would like to help support my channel, help me make more videos, help me keep talking to you about vampires for as long as we both shall live, join the Patreon and become one of us. Otherwise, you know, algorithm, etc., feed it, worship it, sacrifice to it. We are all its slaves. But at least we have the vampires for comfort.